On April 8th, Mr. Bartel publicly announced in 2024 he was responding to the independent movement happening in America, evidenced by the 60% of the American people not wishing to have Biden-Trump as their only choice for president in the November 2024 elections. 1 month later, on May 9th, 2024, the Independent Movement of America Network, or IMOVE, was publicly announced by Mr. Bartel, offering the network as a pathway for American voices and their vote to be heard in the November 2024 presidential elections. As president of IMOVE, as a U.S. public policy leader, and throughout every campaign, Mr. Al Bartel remains committed that neighborhood, community, faith, and small business leaders have access to the public policy process to the same degree as lobbyists, special interest groups, and corporations. Please welcome Mr. Al Bartel.
Thank you, Carrie. To the citizens and residents of the city of Atlanta, the entire state of Georgia, the southeast region of the nation, United States of America, and the entire global community. We're here today to call upon a conversation for peace. It is clear that the two-party system in America has forgotten about democracy for America. Instead, they have engaged in political vengeance. The political marketing stakeholders are clearly interested in vengeance as a reference point for the American political policy system. The independent movement in America, over 60 to 70%, has said we are not interested in two candidates based on political vengeance. The independent movement in America is calling for something else other than a conversation for political vengeance. President Biden and President Trump did not participate in the American primary system. Instead, they have set up a duel to the death conversation for November 5th that includes rage, upset, vengeance, division, and conflict. As president of IMOVE Network, the vanguard for the emerging independent movement in America, we call for peace. We say that these two debates must be about bringing America together. We say that these two debates must be about ushering in democracy. We say that these two debates must reach out to America rather than cause division, rage, and upset in America. As such, we have designed a declaration of peace for the future of America. I shall now read this declaration such that it will be recorded in the annals of history in the dawn of the 21st century. Whereas the hour of vengeance is assured in the 2024 presidential election debates by the domination of the two-party system in America, and whereas the June 27, 2024 presidential debate can be an unprecedented call for peace. Whereas the 2024 presidential debate in Atlanta can be a debate for peace rather than a debate for political vengeance. And whereas to those who would come to the cradle of the South known as Atlanta and bring rage, we say bring peace. Whereas to those who would come to Atlanta to bring division and march and destroy buildings, march and turn over cars, we say bring peace. And whereas to those who would come to bring conflict based on the global conflict such as between Israel and the Gaza Strip, such as between Russia and Ukraine, between the United States and Iran. When we look at the Middle East, when we look at countries in Africa who are battling each other each and every day, the Brexit in the European Union causing conflict, churning up rage, the indigenous populations of South America moving toward America, the indigenous populations in America begin to consider, we say one thing to America: be true to what you put on paper. The democracy is a stand for peace. So we usher this declaration of peace for the future of America. Therefore, this declaration of peace is presented to be enacted with all deliberate intent and resolution before, during, and after the debates in the American political system. So it's clear that the independent movement has ushered in and declared a declaration for peace. We are not interested in President Biden and President Trump throwing down the gauntlet for vengeance. We're not interested in President Biden and President Trump using our state for Mortal Kombat, parading as a debate. We're not interested in President Biden or President Trump saying that they both are competing for the American black vote and causing vengeance in our culture and community. And last but not least, we as black men are now being considered as the vote that's going to stay home. We're now being considered as the vote that is not interested in democracy. It is not the truth. We as black men are saying once and for all, enough is enough. So if both political systems want to court the black men vote, we are independent of the political system. We are independent of vengeance and rage, and we shall demand that peace come to America. It is our stand, it is our presence, and it is our intent. And now I'll take questions from the press as needed to be, such that the conversation can move forward with all deliberate speed. Right, next week.
You said that you want that to be a debate for peace.
Yes.
What does that look like? What is that?
His question is that the debate next Thursday, we have declared that they are using it as a debate for vengeance. We're saying we want a debate for peace. His question is, what does that look like? Both presidents can ask America to turn out and vote for peace. That's what it could look like. It could look like them having a multi-million-dollar advertisement approach to say, go vote for peace. We had both presidents come to Atlanta and do grandstanding. We can have them come to the debate and say, we are presidents and former presidents of America. We're interested in being true to the Constitution and having a reference point for democracy, ushering in peace. That's what it could look like on the night of the debate.
And then you cited a couple of different examples of vengeance and retribution. Like speaking plainly, I feel like it's pretty easy to look at President Trump and look at those examples of
Right.
times where he sought vengeance, times where he sought retribution. Do you feel like the Democrats are participating in this as well? Do you feel like that they are out for blood, out for vengeance, out for retribution?
His questions point to that the debate could be vengeance and upset. And that is clear that President Trump calls for vengeance, acts vengeful, says things in the media to invoke upset and conflict. His question to me is, do I think that the Democrats and President Biden are doing the same thing? My answer is absolutely yes. When you have the President of the United States who is clear about the primary system, and there were Democratic candidates running, and he say to them, like Maria Antoinette said, let them eat cake, that's absolute mortified vengeance in the face of the American public. And President Biden is just as guilty as former President Trump.
Because the primary
primary race wasn't fair, and it really wasn't much of a race at all.
One of the things you mentioned, you said specifically flipping cars. You mentioned the pro-Palestinian protesters. Were you also maybe speaking about the Cop City folks? Is that kind of where you're headed?
Yes, I want to, not only about Palestinian in Gaza, not about upset about black men being killed and flipping cars and marching and burning buildings, but also about Cop City. The media records what's being said. We have had no representative from local, state, or federal government saying, let's gather for peace and have this project be about bringing peace to our communities. On any given day, they can call the media to say that, and they haven't, because they're interested in stoking the fires for the November 5th election.
Could you see maybe why those protesters feel like they're justified in those actions, right? They're being destructive, right? But they're trying to draw attention to what they feel is a righteous cause. Do you have any sympathy for that?
His question is, do I see that the protesters are authentic and in their approach, they deserve to speak out with rage and upset? And do I feel that they are justified? The reason for them being justified with rage and upset is because they're getting dog meat from both of the political parties. No political party has gone to the protesters of Cop City and said, listen, we want to help you. We hear what you hear. We understand what you do. We're all in the same boat. We can talk. And so the accountability for public policy has been negligent, and the people of Cop City are demonstrating with rage. They are clear that democracy has forgotten them, and we want to bring it back.
The last thing I want to ask you about is, as you mentioned specifically, that black men may just stay home in this upcoming election. Is that really how you feel? Or do you encourage people to do that if they agree with this?
His question is me pointing out that black men may stay home. He is asking me, is that really how I feel? And do I encourage black men to stay home for the election? As black men, we're clear that enough is enough. If us staying home gets this kind of attention, then we're willing to stay home. It's not an option that we want. We're clear about the participation of the democratic process, but we're clear that we're no longer willing to participate in a fake democracy. And if a fake democracy gets put on display by black men staying home, then yes, we will stay home. There is time for both parties to communicate to us. We're available. We're not interested in staying home. We don't want to stay home. We want to be a part of the democratic process, but we will not participate in a fake democracy that uses vengeance as the gauntlet for the outturning vote.
It would be easy to vote to not participate in the election.
Right.
May be seen as a vote for President Trump, right? To not participate in either side.
Right.
Probably helps the Republicans more.
Right.
Do you agree with that?
His question is, to not participate in the turnout vote, particularly black men, would help President Trump. It would guarantee that President Biden does not get reelected. He asked me, do I agree with that? Absolutely. If black men stay home, it's probably going to guarantee beyond the shadow of a doubt that President Biden will not get reelected. And we will be blamed for causing the election of President Trump. We're now blamed for causing the crime and upset in America. We're now blamed for destroying urban America. We're blamed for the demise of the precious sacredness of the black woman. We're blamed for the demise of black children. So if we now have to take a stand for democracy and be blamed for re-election of President Trump, let it come. We will not, as black men, go quietly into the night. You're welcome.
One more question about, kind of piggybacking off of his last question, the independent voter, the independent movement. This election is different than any other. The Heritage Foundation just released a 900-page plan that basically puts all of the authority, all jurisdiction under the President of the United States. Independent
His question points to that all of the power under the American presidency is beginning to subvert the whole reference point for democracy. His question is the end at hand? And where are independent voters about that? Are they scared and are they afraid that the end of democracy has come? It's clear that for decades, hundreds of years, we as Americans has participated in the two-party system in one variation of another. We were not in lockstep with it, but we began to consider it was a reference point worthy of considering. An independent movement is now emerging. It's independent of the Republican or Democratic two-party system because we no longer trust it. America can no longer trust it. We cannot turn our lives and our futures over to it. We are frightened that democracy has come to an end. And it is what has caused the emergence of the independent movement in America.
It says on SEC records that you were a presidential candidate in this 2024 election. You've been a participant in the no labels process as a delegate.
Right.
When no labels said they would no longer put
Right.
on a community ticket,
Right.
you offered to be that kind of a candidate
Right.
to represent a unity ticket vision.
Right.
What do you see as the most value of you being a presidential candidate as it relates to IMOVE and an independent vote, sir?
Her question is that I filed with the Election Commission a document to say that I was running as an independent candidate for the American presidency months ago. And subsequently, I participated with the no labels conversation that was going to choose a unity ticket. They decided they would not go forward with a unity ticket and was calling for that the vengeance in America ceases. So her question points to, why did I file to run as an independent president candidate when I have not had the money, the power, or the signatures to deliver on a campaign? What say me now? My point is, standing back and not being engaged in the process is not an option. I am clear that when I filed as an independent candidate for the American presidency, it sent a message to America that the independent movement is no longer willing to accept the reference point of the two-party system. We had hopes that no labels would launch an American presidential ticket. They did not do that. Many of us who were delegates were massively disappointed, and we respected their decision. But it gave us even more interest in the evolving independent movement of America. And I launched the conversation called IMOVE, Independent Network, and said to the no labels community, we thank you for your diligence, but it's up to America now, and we will take it from here.
It's been asked, do you think there's a particular reason that CNN and the presidential candidates said yes to having this debate in Georgia, in Atlanta? Is there something specific about that?
The question is, do I think it's a particular reason that the two presidential candidates said yes to a debate in Atlanta and CNN offered it? Is there something behind that? Absolutely, beyond the shadow of a doubt. When the numbers come in and show an independent movement, which they call a purple state or a swing state or a battleground state, every statistical reference point points to that is Georgia. Additionally, it points to that in Georgia, there's major upset and backing away from the Democratic Party. They just had a runoff where the Democratic Party endorsed candidates lost to other candidates. It is now clear that Georgia is the vanguard for democracy in America. The statistical reference points point to it. The coverage in the media about Georgia has been massively immense and unprecedented. They know that something is getting ready to unfold. They just can't predict it or control it. So the answer to the question, my sister, is Georgia is now a state that the Democratic machine can no longer control. Georgia is now a state that the Republican machine can no longer control. Georgia is now a state that the massive media environment can no longer predict or control. And everything seems to point to whether the black man is going to vote or the black man going to stay home. Will this stay a battleground state in America? The data points to it, the movement points to it, the passion points to it. Somebody has to stand up and lead that movement. That's why the IMOVE network was created, and we plan to continue to do that.
One last question. You often quote Dr. King. This is an area that Dr. King spent a lot of time in. His last speech on the mountain top,
Right.
he said, quote, we say America.
Be true to what you said on paper, Dr. King.
Said on paper.
Right.
Why did we vote Dr. King, and what do you think Dr. King would say today?
Well, her question speaks to that Dr. King, in his resonance, was grounded here in Atlanta, in the state of Georgia. Southern Christian Leadership is located here in Georgia. The vanguard of the civil rights movement, civil rights leaders, many of them are here in Georgia. When Dr. King pointed to America, be true to what you say on paper, he was talking about democracy. And her question points to what would Dr. King say now? He had a reference point that pointed to that all of us are part of one indistinguishable garment. I can't be what I ought to be until you become what you ought to be. The Reverend Jesse Jackson had a phrase called a rising tide lifts all boats. President James Earl Carter, who invoked the whole human rights as we came to the end of the 20th century and in the 21st century. The Carter Center is here in Georgia. The Republican vanguard that liberated the South had a march to the sea that came through Georgia. So here we are in the precipice of the dawn of the 21st century, and Georgia is once again at the vanguard of democracy. It is a mantle that I accept freely, and I shall continue to do so.
One more question here, though. Where does this movement go from here? You know, every
Sure.
American would believe we do need to this time.
Right.
Elections, but where do they go here? Because
Right.
one candidate's promising a bloodbath.
Right.
How does this move forward?
His question is, where does the movement go from here? One candidate is saying there'll be a bloodbath if he doesn't get elected. And so where does the movement go from here? What does it mean? The organizer of the March on Washington in 1963, A. Philip Randolph, said, we must organize, we must mobilize. For that, we have to take leadership. So I'm calling for every state all over America to have what's called an IMOVE network chapter. The data points to every state in America being engaged in an independent movement, an independent conscious, but it's not organized yet. So where we go from here, my friend, is we must organize. So I plan to go to every state in the union to communicate that the independent movement is alive. We must organize, we must stand, and we must usher in democracy in the 21st century. That is where we must go from here. So the moderator is going to come back up now and close out the press conference.
Thank you, Mr. Bartel. We hope that this coverage has been a benefit to those of you that get to view it. If you need more information about IMOVE, go to www.imove.network. Thank you for being here at this news conference. This concludes today's IMOVE conference down at Liberty Plaza across from the Georgia State Capitol. Thank you.